Great. Well, thank you so much for being here for this special conversation. As the 25th Attorney General to serve Connecticut, William Tong, a Democrat, was first elected in 2019 and is currently in his second term. Prior to becoming Attorney General, he served 6 consecutive terms from 2007 to 2019 as an elected state representative in the Connecticut General Assembly, where he was Judiciary Committee Chair. Prior to that, Attorney General Tong practiced for 18 years as a litigator in both state and federal courts. A Connecticut native, Attorney General Tong grew up in the Hartford area and attended schools in West Hartford. He graduated from Phillips Academy, Andover, Brown University, and the University of Chicago Law School. He is the oldest of 5 children and grew up working side by side with his immigrant parents in their family's Chinese restaurant. I also want to recognize a couple of special guests here. Mayor Tom DeVivo is here. Mayor, thank you. I also want to recognize Timothy Larson. Timothy Larson, Commissioner of the Connecticut Office of Higher Education, is here. Timothy's a proud alum, and I'm really happy that he's going to be a guest speaker in my class later this afternoon. Takes a little bit of the weight off of me. Thank you, Timothy. Welcome, Mr. Attorney General, and thank you for coming back to Eastern. You know, we first met in last May, in advance of our graduate commencement. In addition to celebrating our students on that day, we were proud to confer upon you the inaugural Distinguished Public Service Award and have you address the graduating class. I think we can both agree that much has happened in Connecticut, in our nation, and across the globe since then.
What are you talking about?
So before we delve into some specific issues, I wanted to begin with this. Can you tell us about a typical day in the life of the Connecticut Attorney General, that's you, and what issues are you particularly focused on now?
So first of all, let me thank Eastern President Ismaili for having me here. Thank you to the faculty and staff and students. Thank you, students, for being here and for taking time. I know that when I was where you are, it might not have been what I wanted to do in my free time. So I appreciate you taking time to be a part of this conversation. I also want to just observe. This is not my first rodeo here at Eastern. I've been here a bunch, and I've been in this room a bunch. But let me just observe. I'm here with my good friend Tim Larson, who's Eastern 81, I think. And back in 1981, a lot of us aren't here, right? I mean, certainly not in 1961. But 1981, still, the idea that you would have Attorney General William Tong, the first Asian American elected to any state office in Connecticut's history, and President Karim Ismaili of Eastern Connecticut State University would have been unthinkable. And I just want to thank, and so I want the students to mark that. And that this means soon enough you will be sitting where we're sitting. Notwithstanding anybody's efforts to stop you from doing that, is happening. And take my word for it. And so I think it's a real statement about Eastern. It's a statement about this community, a statement about our state. I am the state's lawyer. So what does that mean? I'm not the general counsel, and so I'm not like the governor's lawyer, personal lawyer. I am his lawyer in that I represent the governor in his role as governor. But I am the state's lawyer, and I represent all of the functions of state government, including Eastern Connecticut State University, as its lawyer. You have your own lawyers here, but as it goes up through the regions, it ultimately ends up on my desk. And so my job is to run the state's largest law firm. We have about 225 lawyers, more than 300 staff. And we represent the state in everything that you would expect the state to need on a legal basis. So if DOT needs to build a new bridge and we need a bunch of contracts, my lawyers do that. If there's unfortunately a child at DCF who's being abused, I step in and take care of that child. If a taxpayer doesn't pay their taxes and the Department of Revenue Services has to take action, I take action. And when the President of the United States and the Trump administration take action to hurt Connecticut, it's my job to fight back. So yesterday, that's how my day started. My day started with a press conference where I announced a lawsuit by me and 21 other states against the Trump administration for failing to fund SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, otherwise known as food stamps. This impacts a lot of people on this campus. As of Saturday, if they don't resolve it, SNAP will be defunded, which means there are roughly 400,000 people in Connecticut, 120,000 of them children, who will not be able to go to the store and use their EBT card and buy milk, bread, eggs. They won't be able to feed themselves. And that obviously is a desperate and very serious situation, which is why we're in court now, suing the president. This is my 38th lawsuit against the president. And I just want to say, that's not a good thing. It is not a good thing that Connecticut, acting through its attorney general, should have to sue the president over something that he has no right to do, which is to cut off SNAP for people, hundreds of thousands of people across Connecticut, across the country. But then after that, you know, I focused on the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, which is a challenge. It's the authority, the regulators who oversee electricity rates, and if you follow that news, it's a big mess. And so I'm involved in that. We talk about other litigation involving a lawsuit involving another state university, involving a human resources issue. That happens almost every day. And so that's a day in the life. I go from issue to issue to issue. I have to switch gears a lot and take a second, take a deep breath and say, okay, what are we doing now? Oh, DCF. Okay, and then I got to get my child protection brain moving. Oh, we're talking about DOT? All right, then I got to shift in that. And then the governor calls on the phone and you know, Ned's got a litany of complaints and I have to figure out what he's talking about, right? And then try to respond in real time. So that's a day in the life. Let me just close by saying, you mostly read about the big stuff. You read about Trump, you read about my lawsuits against Purdue Pharma and the Sacklers and the opioid and addiction industry. You read about my lawsuits against social media companies, which I know is not super popular among the student body. But that's, while that's the big ticket stuff, that's like 10, 15, 20% of what I do. The bulk of what I do is the day-to-day blocking and tackling of being the state's lawyer. One example was working with the town to preserve two buildings, the Hooker and the Hale, in downtown Willimantic. This is a process. We're still working on it. But I got involved because that involved historic preservation. And so I have a role as a lawyer, as the state's lawyer, in buildings that are registered on national registers and are considered to be historically important and significant. And that's why I got involved in an effort to make sure that we could remediate and develop that property, but in a way that honors the law and historic preservation. So that's a quick snapshot of what my job entails.
Okay, well that's certainly a diverse range of issues you're dealing with on a daily basis.
Well, not unlike a college president,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you have to switch gears. In many respects, a lot of the stuff I just described, you have to deal with too.
Sure.
You go from, you know, something related to the physical plant here at Eastern, then an HR issue, then a student issue, right? Then a federal funding issue,
Sure.
state funding issue.
But I'm sure that that those kinds of issues and the fact that you are switching and you're dealing with things also, it's satisfying to know that you can make a difference and that you can advance. You know, that from my perspective, the mission of the university, from your perspective, what Connecticut needs, you know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let me apologize for my attire today. And it's a little cash. I hurt my foot. I overdid it on the elliptical. And of course, my chief of staff said this morning, I don't think you're supposed to hurt yourself on the elliptical. But I hurt some ligaments in my foot. So Tim Larson, these are Hoka's, and I'm trying to protect my foot. So sorry about that.
That's fine. Yeah. You're totally fine the way you are. So I've read and you've said many times that you're concerned about defending the sovereign state of Connecticut.
Yes.
Can you talk about what that means from your perspective, for the perspective of people that are from Connecticut? Most of us are from Connecticut. And how does that inform your work?
Who here, either as a student or professor, are in the history, political science, pre-law space? Okay, all right. Well, in law school, they call on you. I won't do that to the students today because I didn't give you a reading last night that you have to be prepared for. But I am going to do law school in 60 seconds. So this is the sovereign state of Connecticut. What does that mean? That means that Connecticut is independent of Rhode Island, of Massachusetts, of New York, of Texas, of California, of Alabama. And sovereignty means that we make the decisions and that we get to live the way that Connecticut wants to live. We are not, unlike other countries, we're not a province, like Canada has provinces, and they're just, a subset or a function of the larger Commonwealth. I think Canada's a Commonwealth still.
Correct.
We are an independent state, sovereign, joined together by our consent in a federation with 49 other states. What's the federation called? Very good. You just got an A in your first law school class. The United States of America. So it's really important to remember that. It's really important to remember that we are not part of one big monolithic nation. Yes, we are joined together with 49 other states in a country, and we can call ourselves a nation. But as a technical matter, we are 50 sovereign states joined together by our consent. We delegated only limited powers to the federal government. What powers are those? Foreign affairs, military, national security, immigration, okay? And why did we do that? Because it makes sense that things that states can't handle effectively on their own or for which it is too inefficient, we ask the Federation to do it, right? So it makes no sense, for example, for Connecticut to send customs and immigration officials to JFK or Logan to check in people only from Connecticut. That's bonkers, right? That doesn't work. And so we asked the Federation to handle that. Everything else that we didn't delegate to the Federation, we reserved for ourselves. That's the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution, okay? Plain as day. There is something in the Constitution called the Supremacy Clause, okay? And you hear a lot about the Supremacy Clause, clearly, especially on my social media feed, because people try to lecture me about the Supremacy Clause. And they say the Supremacy Clause means you got to do everything Donald Trump tells you to do. No, I don't. That's not what the Supremacy Clause says. The Supremacy Clause says you 50 states decided to delegate limited powers to the federal government. The federal government has the prerogative and is the lead authority on matters that we delegated to the federal government, but not on everything else. For example, the academic freedom of Eastern is none of the federal government's business. The state of Connecticut did not say to the other 49 other states, hey, let's let the federal government control what we teach and how we teach and what we think and what we prioritize here at Eastern. We never said that. And so The Supremacy Clause does not stand for the proposition that if Donald Trump wants to come in here, or Linda McMahon, and tell Eastern what to do, that they have the right to do that. They do not. And that's what sovereignty means. That's why everything that I do with respect to the federal government is through the lens of sovereignty. It's through the lens of what is the relationship between us and the federal government? Did we tell the federal government to handle something on our behalf? And if we didn't, then it's none of the federal government's business what we do.
Thank you. So I wanted to talk a little bit about education, higher education specifically. So and there's a bit of a preamble here, but it's to provide the context. So since January 2025, the Trump administration has taken significant actions impacting higher education, as you know, including a plan to dismantle the Department of Higher Education, cuts to federal funding, changes to policies concerning student loans, diversity, and immigration. And of course, these are reverberating across the United States. Mm-hmm. And earlier this month, the White House offered a compact to a select number of universities, promising preferential access to federal funds in exchange for adopting specific policies such as mandating standardized testing and limiting international student enrollment. So at Eastern, just a few days ago, our Senate, University Senate, adopted a resolution affirming the importance of academic freedom, First Amendment rights, and public discourse. And we did so because I think of the environment that we're in, where that was being questioned, right? And the Charlie Kirk sort of assassination sort of reinforced that. So from your perspective, what kinds of things should public universities be attentive to, considering the environment that we're in?
So let me take a step back. Implicit in your preamble, I think is maybe an idea that we or the administration or the Department of Education or some group of faculty or the faculty senate are making choices, okay? And policy choices that you could do or not do, right? That are optional. And I'm going to challenge that premise. A lot of it's not optional. Your mission, I assume, writ large, I'm sure you have a mission that's written, but your mission is to prepare these students for their future, right? There's no other reason to come here, right? You come here to learn. Yes, knowledge in and of itself is enriching and important, but you are preparing yourselves for your future, whatever it looks like. But that means being ready for the world, such as it is and will be. And let me just say, I remember students when I was sitting where you are. That was a hot second ago. And I think those of us who are of this vintage know what I mean, right? Doesn't it feel like we were sitting there a hot second ago? Which means to the young people, you're going to be sitting here a hot second from now. It's going to happen quick. I can't even believe I have an adult child. She's 19. That happened quick. It does. And the world that you are in now, and the world that you are going to live in, is so interconnected and international, and so much more than it was 5 years, 10 years, 20 years ago, 100 years ago, but it'll be ever more connected and international 10 years from now, 20 years from now. Why? Because of airplanes, because of air conditioning in cars, because of the internet, because of devices, because of technology. That cannot be stopped. There's no way, unless you want to close this place down like North Korea and not engage with the rest of the world. This is still the most important market and the most important economy in the world. Sorry, China, but it is. It is. China is the biggest economy because of the number of people. But the US is irretrievably bound to the rest of the world. And so the idea that we're going to cut off the flow of international students, how? What are we talking about here? Here's the other thing that's a part of those compacts. The compacts want us, the schools that they want to sign on to the compact, and the compact is being roundly rejected. Has anybody accepted it yet?
I think it's one and one with modifications.
Oh, who was the one?
I think it was a school in the South, Texas, A&M maybe.
Good luck.
Yeah.
They want us to deny diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. They want us to eliminate that, right? They want us not to talk about it, not to acknowledge it. How? Look at this room. Remember how I started. Attorney General Tong is here with President Ismaili. The country and the world, but our country, our state, our country, our world is not going to be less diverse 10 years from now. That dam has broken. How do I know? My wife and I are having children. That's how I know. History is moving. People are reproducing. And the population that we are producing is more diverse. My children are called Hapa, half Asian, half white, right? It is a term that has developed over time from our friends in Hawaii. And so we have 3 Hapa children that we have contributed to this world. And so there is no world in which America is less diverse. There's no world in which we are not empowering and advancing women leaders. We need them. They do a better job than we do anyway, right? And there's no world in which we are not advancing and embracing our LGBTQ plus community. Why? Because we need them to work. They're good workers. They're good customers. They're good neighbors. So, and there is no universe in which America does not have immigrants and immigration. This is the most powerful economic engine on earth, period, that the human race has ever concocted or assembled. And if I know one thing, it's that America runs on Dunkin' and immigrant workers. Half of all farm workers, agricultural workers, meatpacking workers in this country, 50% are undocumented. Not just immigrants, undocumented. Okay, so if you want to eat a strawberry tonight, okay, or a hamburger, you need immigrants and undocumented people to do that work for you. I'm not saying it's right, and I'm not saying that we don't need immigration reform. We do. But we also need these workers. And I made a point in Hamden, because I took them as a person of good faith. They stood up and said, well, why don't these people just become citizens? I let that one go, right? It's hard, obviously. But then she said, we should just, not encourage it and not hire these people and not patronize their businesses. And I think she was actually trying to confront this question. So I said, I hear you. But if you want to be pure, okay, and you will not eat off of a plate that has been washed by undocumented hands, you will never eat in a restaurant in Hamden again. That's a fact. And so it's really important that we recognize that diversity, equity, inclusion, immigration is utterly and irretrievably interwoven into who we are as a country and as an economy. And we would do a lot better just to admit that and move on.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. I wanted to just unpack this a little bit more. So whether you're in a university, a business, any kind of nonprofit, any kind of entity, there's a pressure that you're facing now, which is, do you stay the course on those values of diversity,
Yes.
equity, inclusion, belonging? Reinforce those values for your community that you serve, and be very attentive to your mission, or take sometimes preemptive action to avoid possible scrutiny, to maybe lay low. So I think this raises a question about how we think about leadership,
Yeah.
and how we think about maybe even moral courage.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that? Because even in Connecticut, there are different leaders that have different perspectives and are acting in different ways.
Yes.
So can you reflect on that?
So, yes. That's a big question. I thought about this when we talked about it in your office before we came down here. Where I think you have to start is, what's the right thing? What's the right choice for you, your family, your community, the institution that you serve, whatever it is? And I believe the right choice is to stand up and be who we are and to fight for each other. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't talk to lawyers and be smart. And, if there is something that you're doing that's unnecessarily provocative, right, and doesn't advance the mission, then maybe you don't do it, okay? That makes sense. I'm with that. But the idea, and I've heard it from a lot of people, very senior, very smart people who I serve as their lawyer, we just want to be quiet. We want to put our heads down and maybe they won't see us. My response to that is, they know you're there and they're coming. Okay? So there's no hiding from the people that hate what we are about. And that's the word, I use that word deliberately. They hate it. And they're not going to stop. Maybe they don't get to us tomorrow, but they'll get to us eventually. And so I use Paul Weiss as an example. Paul Weiss, a major international law firm. It was the first law firm to be targeted by President Trump, and they capitulated. They bent the knee. They offered $40 million in pro bono services and won't do DEI anymore, and they did what they were told. And the argument by the managing partner at Paul Weiss, who is a major Democratic fundraiser, so he's a big deal on the Democratic side. His argument was, well, if I don't make these concessions and don't cut this deal and capitulate to the president, we will destroy our firm. He will destroy us. And my response to him is, you have destroyed your firm anyway. Okay? And how do I mean? Well, if you're a law student at a distinguished law school and you're deciding between Paul Weiss and Perkins Coie, who did not capitulate, you're going to go to Perkins Coie. And your clients now just saw you chicken out. And so Microsoft fired a bunch of law firms that capitulated. Microsoft. Because their general counsel said, if you won't fight for yourselves, we don't think we can count on you to fight for us. And so I think that that is an important lesson for all of us. Be smart, but do the right thing. And my advice is, hang in there because of what I said earlier. At some point, Donald Trump will not be president. I believe that. And at some point, we will change administrations and politics will change. It's already changed a lot in my 20 years in elective office, right? When the governor first ran for office in 2006 for the U.S. Senate, George W. Bush was terrible. Okay? Now 2025, we all love George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. So it is volatile, but you can be sure, and the people who have been around a while here know this, what we think the world is and what it looks like now is not at all the world we will have in 10 years or 20 years from now. And so, but what I do know is what I said earlier. We are going to be more diverse. We are going to be more connected than we are now. And so that's why you might as well embrace the future now and try to weather this storm now and stand up for who you are and fight for each other, because we're going to get there soon enough. We are winning this battle.
Thank you very much for that. One further question on this. So on the tactics that the Trump administration is taking around, for example, the compact. So first the compact was offered to 9 institutions. Then there was a comment about it being extended to all institutions.
Yeah.
None of those, so basically the conversation has still been around the 9.
Yeah.
7 of whom rejected it outright,
Yeah.
1 have accepted, and 1 sort of like with some caveats. So tell me how you think about the strategy of essentially, so from an institutional perspective, there is an implied threat there.
Yeah.
The implied threat is that the students who rely on federal financial aid, the research that we do at universities, all of the things that we provide to ensure that students' well-being and academic success continues to be our focus, is under threat. And so I think it's that sense of threat, that overarching stress, right, that somehow if we don't stay the course, we will fundamentally lose something, right, or be under threat of losing something which we cannot lose. We cannot lose federal financial aid. That's the challenge, certainly from my point of view and from other presidents' point of view. So how do you think about that tactic, the strategy? Do you still stay the course?
Yes. Again, because we have 3.5 more years of this, and hopefully, but I believe that we have 3.5 more years of this. And in the whole scheme of things, we need to have the stamina to stay in this fight for those 3.5 years and beyond. But I would put back on you, there is a point at which maybe you think, ex-college president, not using you, makes a decision, I'm going to compromise this value today so that I can live to fight another day. I can see that. I can see somebody sitting in a conference room with their lawyers saying, we're going to trade this one thing, okay, for the greater good. This is what all those law firms were betting. The problem is it's not ever just one thing. They keep coming back, and they keep wanting more. Why? Because you rolled the first time. You showed that you can obey and comply. And so now you've exposed yourself, you've proven yourself as being somebody who will roll. So don't be surprised if they try to roll you again. And then there is some cumulative effect at which, now you no longer do DEI. You no longer have, like Michigan State, I think, you no longer have celebrations at Lunar New Year, right, for the Asian American student population. Okay, fine. At what point do they say you can't have a Hillel house? Right? I mean, it's cumulative, and it sneaks up on you, too. You think you make this one compromise and that one compromise. You sell out your immigrant or international students to preserve your NIH funding. But if you're a global, as we are, research institution, and you make all these compromises, at some point you will not be a global research institution. You will have lost that. You have lost your prerogative. People won't come here. They won't feel comfortable here. You won't have the kind of scholarship that distinguishes you from other places. You won't be able to attract professors that you want to come to Eastern Connecticut, which is already tough as it is, right? And so at some point you contort yourself in so many different ways that you become unrecognizable. And that is the risk, which is why I go back to the beginning. It is better not to roll in the first instance because you are sending the message that you will not be rolled going forward. That's my view.
Yeah. So the remaining time, I wanted to focus in on Eastern.
Yeah.
So Eastern is, as you know, Connecticut's public liberal arts university.
Yeah.
And over the last 14 months or so, I've been able to have many conversations, both externally and internally, and I can tell you, Attorney General, that value of the liberal arts is really strong. It's a powerful motivator for what we are and what we do. So I'm wondering if you could talk about what the liberal arts means to you and how it has shaped you and the way that you think about everything, the world, your current position. You're able to reflect on that.
So one of the most vexing, difficult questions we face as a people is how we're ever going to get beyond this moment of hate and rancor and division, and polarization is the word we always use, but we're just not getting along. And how will we ever find our way back to each other? Okay? I suspect most of this room is kind of feeling what I'm saying, but there's a lot of people on this campus that aren't feeling what I'm saying. Okay? And in this community. And how will we ever find our way back to each other as friends, neighbors, colleagues, countrymen, right? Joined together by our consent in this federation. So the other day I went to New Haven and had coffee with the Attorney General of Tennessee. The Attorney General of Tennessee is a Republican. His name is Jonathan Scrimetti. He's from Mystic, believe it or not. He's done a lot of good work with us on antitrust, on social media, on Google, on opioids. But Jonathan Scrimetti has also taken a lot of heat because it is his case that bears his name, Scrimetti, that stands for the proposition that Tennessee can deny gender-affirming care to trans people, trans youth. And a lot of people in the LGBTQ plus community think that that law is hateful, and that his defense of the law and the case that bears his name is wrong, and that honestly, that they think he's a bad guy. He's my friend, and that's really important. It's really important that I look beyond the Scrimetti case, and I look beyond what that law says, and recognize that he's the Attorney General of a sister sovereign state. He's actually from Connecticut. We've done a lot of good work together, and to acknowledge and recognize his humanity. Why? Number one, or most importantly, to hold the union together. What does it have to do with liberal arts? I don't think I have that conversation with him. I don't think we spent an hour and a half if he and I both did not have a strong and robust liberal arts education that gives us the intellectual dexterity and makes us socially and intellectually nimble so that we can talk. We talked about Scrimetti. We talked about his case. He knows I don't agree with him. But we have the tools to engage with each other with facts and science. Sure, maybe we don't see facts and science the same way, but also embracing at a coffee this argumentative, competitive discourse between our competing sets of ideas. I don't have those tools unless, A, intellectually I refine them in the classroom, right? The ability to assert my own position, assert it forcefully, back it up with facts, but then make sure to hear him and listen to him, right? Not just to like beat him in the argument, but to like make sure I'm not missing something, or there's not something of value that he's saying that I can incorporate into my thinking. And it gave me the ability to sit with somebody from Tennessee, because I had been to a liberal arts institution and spent time in the classroom with people from experiences, places that I have never been before. I've only been to Tennessee once. And that, I think, is what we mean by diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, right? That all of that enabled me and Jonathan Scrimetti to have a real robust conversation and to build the relationship. Why is that important writ large? Because, you know, he's Attorney General now, I'm Attorney General now, we have a lot of work together, great. But we're roughly the same age. And God willing, and the voters willing, we're gonna be in this game for the next 20 years. I don't know what version of me or him will be together, but he'll be in another job, I'll be in another job. And at some point along the line, right, Jonathan Scrimetti will want to be able to pick up the phone and say, hey, William, can you help me with this? Or, hey, William, I don't think you're right about that. And I know that I can do the same.
Thank you. So you have, do you want to quit?
Yeah, I just want to ask a quick question. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yeah. Do you want to go to the microphone? Well, we'll have open questions shortly, but yeah, go ahead.
Sorry about that. I just want to ask you something. Adrian Scrimetti, is he also part of the staff lawsuit?
No, he is not.
Just want to ask that.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
But I won't divulge the contents of our conversation. But I gotta deal with that too, because his constituents are getting crushed by this. Red states are far more dependent on federal funding than blue states are. If you ever get down on yourself because you're here in Connecticut, don't, all right? Be thankful you're not in Mississippi right now, with all due respect to Mississippi, okay? Rural states that don't have robust economies like Connecticut, they're really gonna get punished by this. That's why the politics are so difficult right now.
I think you remind us of that sort of paradoxical effect
Yeah.
of how we think about who's getting impacted most severely by what is going on.
And let me also say, I'm sorry, but
No, it's fine.
your question, the way I took it was, and I don't mean to be critical, as a little bit of an indictment of A.G. Scrimetti, right? Okay, fine, I get it. We don't agree. People are complicated. History is complicated. And it's not to excuse bad behavior, but is to recognize that human beings are human beings. I'll give you an example. I was at the dinner table a few years ago under Trump 1, and my daughter Eleanor, who's now a college sophomore, she said something like Donald Trump's a bad guy, okay? And we're at the dinner table, and I said, why do you say that? And she looked at me like, you're the Democratic Attorney General of our state, Dad. What do you mean, why? He's a bad guy, he's done all these bad things. And I said, okay, I hear you, but it's complicated. And she says, what do you mean? I said, well, not everybody's 100% bad, not everybody's 100% good. And I said, let me ask you about Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Yes, great, you know, a lion of the Democratic Party. You know, took us out of the Great Depression. He's a giant on the left, yes. How about Earl Warren? Oh, who's Earl Warren? Earl Warren was Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, and Brown v. Board of Education, most of the major Supreme Court cases that are the firmament of civil rights law in this country happened under Earl Warren, okay? There is no bigger giant on the left legally than Earl Warren. Yeah, sound like two pretty good guys. Yes, Eleanor. Did you also know that Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Earl Warren, as Attorney General of California and Governor of California, are responsible for the internment of 125,000 Japanese Americans in concentration camps on American soil? Oh, yeah. It's complicated. That's the worst, one of the worst, other than slavery, one of the worst human rights, civil rights abuses in our nation's history, committed by those two guys.
Yeah. So I wanted to...
Sorry about that.
Yeah. I want to return to something that you have spoken about today, which is your immigrant background.
Yeah.
And this will be my last questions. So I know how my immigrant background has shaped me, and I know sort of what that means, and I suspect there's some similarity with you and your sort of family and your trajectory in life. Can you discuss or describe how your immigrant background has shaped your outlook on the world and your engagement in these issues that you're dealing with? And maybe it doesn't all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe it does.
Number one, my wife, who's not an immigrant, well, her family came in 1640 to New Haven. But Elizabeth Hotchkiss Tong says to me often, you need to be more grateful. You know, when I complain, bitch and moan about my job, and college presidents give me a hard time. That's how I wake up every day. Grateful. Grateful that I'm an American. Grateful that I'm an American because the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution says I'm an American. My parents were not citizens when I was born. I was born the first American citizen in my family by right of my birth in Hartford Hospital. I'm grateful that that's true in this country. I'm grateful that, I talked about this yesterday during my announcement of the SNAP lawsuit, that I, in my lifetime, have never involuntarily gone hungry. I've had great schools here in Connecticut, great roads, right? Police and fire have always been there for me. That is not true in the rest of the world, in many, many places. And that this country took my parents in, they met in a Chinese restaurant in Bloomfield, Connecticut, and I'm sitting here now as Attorney General, is a miracle. It is a miracle, by the way, that so many people share. So many people in this room share in some way or another. And so I am grateful. So if anybody thinks that those of us who criticize our country or sue the president don't love this country, we love it more than anybody, because we are so grateful for the life that we have been given. I am also mindful of how it could have not turned out this way. My grandparents and my dad ran for their lives from the communists and from the Japanese. And if they stayed, they probably would have died. They found their way, of all places, to Hartford, Bloomfield, Connecticut, and then West Hartford and Glastonbury. And I'm always mindful that it didn't have to turn out this way. It could have gone very badly. And so we're very fortunate that we relied on the kindnesses of so many people. You know, there's this, among immigrants, there's this mythology that we just come here and work our asses off and we do it all by ourselves. It's nonsense, right? so many people help each other, help you along the way. People throw a block. If Morton Blumenthal, Jewish American, doesn't take my dad into a bank in the early 1970s and vouch for him, my dad doesn't get a loan. We don't open our second Chinese restaurant. It was a true character loan. Okay? Dad didn't do that by himself. Morton Blumenthal helped him, which is why I'm William Morton Tong. Okay? So people throw blocks, and they help you, and you get lucky, and I am mindful that my parents and my grandparents went through hell to get here. And so and that's true about a lot of immigrants, especially the immigrants now that are fighting tooth and nail. And I get it. People are undocumented. It's a symptom of or demonstration of our broken immigration system. Yes. But people are fighting hard for themselves and their families so they can live. And so whenever I'm down on myself or where we are, what the president did yesterday, and I worry about the future of our country, I just have to take a deep breath and be grateful, because it is not ever going to be close to what my parents and grandparents went through and what they had to gut out and persevere through to get here. And it's not even close to what immigrant parents are doing now for their children and their families. So when people ask me, Mr. Attorney General, in this moment, it's so hard, federal government's going bonkers, like what can we do? What should I do? And I often say to people, be like the immigrants. Like, get up and fight for every inch, like my parents did. 7 days a week, 12 to 15 hours a day. Fight for your family, fight for your neighbors, fight for your community, stand up for them, speak for them, help them. Be Morton Blumenthal. Grab someone and bring them into a bank. It's harder now, but do what you can to help somebody. That's what my immigrant experience means to me.
Yeah. Do what you can to help somebody. That's good. That's really good. So we have a few minutes left for any questions. I want to do this. I want to privilege students. So if there are any students that have any questions or comments for the Attorney General. I know the Attorney General has another event in New London.
For immigrants?
Shortly, yeah. Do any of our students have any questions or comments? Okay. Thank you, Alyssa.
Mr. Attorney General, I want to thank you so much for your time today, coming to Eastern. I wanted to ask you, you just mentioned that your about your parents' immigrant background, how they worked really hard. How is suing the Trump administration for you? Is it really difficult to do? And do you think your background, you saw your parents working really, really hard. Do you think it's helped you?
Yes.
In suing the administration, which is something I know is very hard to do in these difficult times?
Is it hard? Is it hard? Of course it's hard. But my lawyers in other states do an incredible job. And we're winning a lot of these battles because we're right on the law. And the president has violated the law in a lot of respects. And in many ways, that's easy, right? If you break the law, you ought to be held accountable.
Right.
It informs what I do, right? Mm-hmm. It helps me, for example, with SNAP. I know, even though I have been privileged not to have gone a day without a meal involuntarily, I know people that have. And I know that there are many people in the immigrant community who do right now. I know because I've served them meals in a soup kitchen. I know because I've sat with them and their children, and they've appealed to me to fight hard for them. I know because I've served them in the legislature when I was representing Stamford in the House of Representatives. I know because I have friends and family whose lives haven't gone the same way as mine, and they struggle. And so that immigrant experience being one step, just one step removed from it. My dad has a complicated immigration story. Mm-hmm. And he could have easily have been deported before I was born. And so my parents would have had to shut down their restaurant, shut everything down, and leave and lose everything. And so I know what that means for a family. And so that experience informs almost everything that I do.
And it helps you in your job. It
helps me focus the issues. It helps me see why these things are important.
Gives you some purpose.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've got time for.
Let me say that. Look, we could do this for another several hours, and we could have a conversation about the rule of law and constitutional crisis and Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, the spending clause, whatever you want. Federalism. At the end of the day, all of these lawsuits are about real people who are getting hurt right now. Okay? There's always, at the end of these lawsuits, somebody that is being impacted. And that's why it's always important to focus on who, not what the legal argument is, who. Who at the end of the line is getting screwed or getting punished.
Yes, please.
Mr. Attorney General, my uncle is a birthright citizen. He was born to an English father and an American mother overseas in England. And he's terrified about birthright citizenship being taken away and him being deported.
Yeah.
And he's, begun to make preparations in case that should happen.
Yeah.
What would you say to sort of reassure him and steps that he and the rest of our family can do to kind of make sure that we protect his rights and keep him safe?
I would tell him to stand his ground and not prepare to leave or go somewhere else. He's an American, and the more we cower and run, and that's what they want to do. They want to bully us and intimidate us. They actually think it's kind of funny. It's not funny at all, but they think it's funny. And the more we react, I was really disappointed. There's a Yale professor named Tim Snyder who has written a number of important books, including on tyranny. And then he picked up and moved out of the country. Good job, Tim, right? Giving in. This is our country as much as it is Donald Trump's. And so I wouldn't give up. I wouldn't give an inch.
Thank you.
We have time for one more comment, maybe two. That's it.
All right.
Because I want to make sure.
Once again, I want to thank you for coming, Attorney General. One thing that I want to ask you is that I do think the administration is probably going to have a confrontation with you at some point. So my question to you is, with the talk of there being a soft secession among other blue states, does Connecticut have any plans for that, or is there a kind of political calculus that's coming into play later on?
Yeah, there's no... Connecticut will not be a party to any secession, soft, hard, or otherwise. And I don't even know what soft secession means. This is the most powerful, most successful economy on earth because we are joined with 49 other states. Because you can start a business and sell products from Connecticut in Ohio and Pennsylvania and Texas and make good money. Because you can, get training here and take your degree, or you go get a professional degree at some other school in the region and go to Texas and go to California and bring your family and all the money you're going to spend to that economy, right? So we are so interconnected and intertwined that there's no real way. I think soft secession, right, contemplates that we can sort of do this safely and everyone can retreat to their corners and not have to deal with each other. How? It's just impossible. Our economy relies on Texas and Michigan and California and vice versa, and our schools and our institutions. Otherwise, we're not America anymore. And Connecticut's not nearly as safe and as strong without the other states on our side. So I appreciate the question, but that's just not the world I think we live in.
All right, last question, Matthew?
Thank you for coming to Eastern, Mr. Tong. I wanted to ask you, because the Attorney General is not only a very powerful position, it's a very high-profile position. And because of that, it's traditionally been something of a stepping stone for aspiring politicians.
Next question.
I'm not asking if you're planning to run, don't worry. I wanted to ask, how do you balance being the state's top lawyer in a sort of objective sense and being an elected politician? Like when you make an Instagram post or on social media, how do you balance between your sort of displaying yourself as a politician with your own aspirations and informing the public on what you do in your job? How do you balance those two sides of the job?
That might be the best question of the whole session.
Yeah. That's a great question that different electeds could answer differently. My job is to be the state's lawyer, and being a lawyer means that you are bound to your oath, your ethical duties. There's a lot of rules and guardrails around being a lawyer. But I think the Attorney General is also expected and demanded to give voice to our state and people in our state who either do not have voice or who are not heard. And so that's why it's really important for me, because of my platform, and because you're right. I mean, being Attorney General means that I work on a lot of issues that people care about, and it makes it into the public domain, into the news, onto social media. And I have an obligation, irrespective of whether it helps me get elected or not, and of course it does, but I have an obligation to give voice and to speak on issues of public concern, because what the Attorney General does and thinks about these issues carries a lot of weight. And that's not me. That was true about Attorney General Blumenthal and Attorney General Jepsen and Attorney General Lieberman, right? It's true about all of them. It's just my role demands and I think requires that I step up and speak for the people of our state.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank Attorney General Tong. I will say that this semester I'm teaching a course called Why Universities Matter. This is a perfect exemplar of that. So thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Attorney General.